Welcome to the Fade 5, a college edition here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Ben Wittenstein, Nate Jacobson. Nate, we're coming into October, spooky season. We really know these college football teams now. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I was just telling you before the show how I'm having trouble. And I think one of the things with college football is after we see these teams get meaningful games under the belt and we kind of know what they are, the lines get tighter. And this week's kind of a weird week because it's not a great game in terms of big TV games or probably meaningful games for the college football playoff. But the next few games have absolutely mouth-watering matchups. So I feel like if you're getting into college football, maybe observe what's the landscape, what's going on. Don't force any bets because there's going to be some really good opportunities in October and then even into November when there's a lot of motivational angles.
Yeah, this weekend is fun. Don't get us wrong. We love the board this weekend, but week 7 and week 8 in college football, Nate, is going to be it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be perfect. You're going to need 5 TVs in your house just to watch all the great games at the same time.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the advantages of the conference realignment and kind of adding those West Coast teams into the Big Ten, and then also just adding Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. And I know they play each other next week in their Red River rivalry.
All right, let's get started, though, with this weekend. We're very excited, as we always do, with the Fade 5 College Edition. It's time to get on the plus bus, Nate. Plus bets that you like where you can make some extra money on, get a little seduced by that juice. We'll start with you, Nate. What do you like?
Yeah, so this might be the low number in the market, but I'm going to take SMU on the money line plus 200. You should be able to get something better than that. Maybe even wait till Saturday when this game kicks off at noon Eastern to take the Mustangs here. They are playing Louisville at Louisville. It's SMU's first away game in the ACC. Maybe a little bit of a tough spot for SMU or coming off big wins at home against TCU and Florida State. That Florida State one especially big because it was their first ever ACC game under the lights at home, and then TCU is a local rival. But I also think Louisville is overvalued. They had a very misleading final score against Georgia Tech where they won 31-19 2 weeks ago. They had a scoop and score or a fumble return for a touchdown. They also had a blocked field goal to extend a 5-point lead to a 12-point lead late in the fourth quarter. So I don't think this Louisville team is that good. They were really good last year, made the AC title game, but they're taking a step back this year in roster quality, and also their schedule's tougher. Last week they go to Notre Dame, lose. I actually thought they played an okay game, but I could see a little bit of a letdown here after the Notre Dame loss, after that Georgia Tech game, which, as I said, kind of a misleading final. I also like SMU because of their quarterback, Jennings, who's a huge upgrade over Preston Stone. So I don't know if the market is fully gauged that SMU is a better quarterback with Jennings as quarterback. And SMU's loss this year, it looked bad at the time at home on a Friday night against BYU. But after we're seeing what BYU's done the last few weeks, specifically against Kansas State and Baylor, not as bad of a loss. So I like SMU. I think they're live here at Louisville. I do think there could also be some points in this game, but in terms of a fun bet, just to maybe start off a money line parlay with underdogs, if you're looking to do it, I think SMU is a fine leg to have as part of that.
I like that bet, Nate. I really do. I think that's a good way to look at it. I have a bet from my end on the plus bus that is not as juicy as 2-1. However, it's your alma mater, Nate, and it's the Missouri Tigers getting plus 115 against Texas A&M, going on the road to the Aggies. You're gonna have to face the Aggies and the 12th man at Texas A&M, but I think Mizzou comes away with the victory on this one. I think because mainly 3 words: offense, offense, and offense. And Mizzou is really good at throwing the football and running the football. They're 13th in the country in offensive success rate. They're top 15 in passing attack. I think this offense will be able to just simply outscore Texas A&M because we do know they've made some quarterback changes. Connor Wegman is still maybe going to be the starting quarterback for this game. I know they talked about it's possible that he is. Marcel Reed has come in after Wegman got hurt, and he's looked really good, and the offense has actually looked much better under Reed than it did under Wegman for Texas A&M. But they might still go with Wegman in this game. We're not really sure. I love Mizzou more if they do stick with Wegman instead of going with Reed. But I still think Mizzou's offense just in general is going to be able to take advantage of this Texas A&M defense. And I know Texas A&M defense is good. It hasn't been great. It's been a little underperforming this season. And I think Mizzou is good enough coming off of a bye to take advantage of that and win on the road. Also, we need to talk about how poorly Texas A&M has played at home this season, so to speak, especially against the spread. They have not covered a game at home this season. So there's something to think about. Mizzou's plus 2.5. At this point, I just like the money line. I think Mizzou can sneak a little win on the road here.
Yeah, obviously this is a game I thought about a lot. It's Mizzou's first big test because they got through September 4-0 off a bye, but the last game they played was against Vanderbilt where they won in double overtime, and it's because Vandy's kicker missed a kind of a short field goal that would have sent the game to a third overtime. So Mizzou did enough to get by. I'm expecting a little bit different of a Missouri offense and maybe a better offense, what I'm sure you're hoping for out of the bye. It just hasn't seemed as explosive and attack-minded as it did last season with Brady Cook, Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, and some of those other playmakers. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of Mizzou, you'd expect their best effort off the bye. If you look at the schedule after this game, there's not too many big tests. Like, this is one of Missouri's only huge tests in SEC play this season. And if they
great schedule
game, they're probably going to be odds-on favorite to make the college football playoff when those odds are released. So, yeah, I think it's all comes down to the Mizzou offense. And if was what we saw early in the season kind of what they are at an offense that took a step back from last year, or do they have another gear that they could display after the bye week against a Texas A&M team that I obviously you mentioned some of the concerns that they have. And in terms of getting into this game, in terms of like entry point to bet, maybe wait to see if Wegman starts. This ticks up to +3 and take Mizzou, or at a better money line in your case. It's hard to know, though. Maybe on those, I think what we learned last week, that Thursday at 7 p.m. Central, the SEC releases injury report. So maybe if you see the line move for this game on Thursday night, you'll have an indication of who's playing quarterback. But it's one of those cases where it's like, I want the A&M starter at a better numbers than Missouri than the A&M backup, because the difference between Wegman and Reed doesn't seem that big at all. And maybe Reed might be better just for the type of offense A&M is running under offensive coordinator Colin Klein.
100%. I think Reed's the better option here now. Do they have some type of loyalty to Wegman, and is Elko going to play him? Maybe. We'll have to see. Thursday night, I'm going to be watching the lines.
That's an interesting point, because Wegman was a recruit from the Jimbo Fisher days, so I don't think there is any loyalty to him. Exactly. They're going to pick whoever has the best chance to give him to win, unless there's a oil-rich booster who's funding the Wegman NIL deal, who's like, no, you have to play the guy that I bought a car for. So that's just the modern things in college football that we have to consider when handicapping on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. So let's get into the nitty gritty, Nate. We got 5 bets. It is the Fade 5. We each got 2, and then we have one that we agree on. Let's start out with number 1.
Number 5.
Number 1, which is number 5 in our list, Nate. I'll go first. We're switching it up. We usually have you do number 5. I'll do number 5, and we're going to go out east just to go back out to Vegas, but we're going to take the Syracuse Orange. Going on the road to play UNLV. They're getting 6.5 points in this game. There's a lot going on with UNLV. We know that. We know with all the quarterback situations and the NIL, and do they owe them $100,000, whatever it is. UNLV's now got a new quarterback, and seemingly it's a guy that a lot of people on the team do like. They played really well. They had a really big win in week 5. Now they have to play Syracuse. And honestly, Syracuse comes to town. This is their first road game of the season. Another team having their first road game of the season after their first 4 at home. They have to play in an interesting environment in Vegas, Allegiant Stadium, a huge stadium. I still like them getting the points. Kyle McCord has been really good for this team offensively. He's been a transformative quarterback. We knew he was going to be probably pretty good transferring from Ohio State, and he's shown that he's really settled into that role at quarterback. I just think this Syracuse offense is going to be good enough to at least keep up with UNLV. There might be a slight chance Cuse is able to win, but you have a UNLV team coming off probably one of the weirdest weeks a college football team has had this season. They're riding high. They had all the adrenaline going into that game against the worst opponent, and they demolished them, and it makes sense. But now you kind of have to come back to reality. You still have a long season ahead of you. You have this new quarterback that you have to get adjusted into the team and adjusted into the strategy. Syracuse comes in as a very full, complete team at this point for the most part. So I'm very interested to see UNLV now laying a touchdown at home in a situation like this against Cuse, who's a team that I think is pretty good. I'll take the points.
Yeah, it does feel like a kind of a big price and a reaction to UNLV's really good performance against Fresno State with Haj Malik Wright taking over for Sluka. Obviously, there was made a big deal about that with Sluka leaving the team. But yeah, as you mentioned, it looks like the players are playing hard for Wright, and the receivers are very happy because Haj Malik Wright is a much better passer than Sluka, who was like 43%, which makes it interesting why he was asking for so much money, or maybe some of the boosters in Las Vegas were like, "Hey, maybe we should try this other quarterback out who will give us a chance for a higher upside." So, yeah, I mean, personally, I hope you win this bet, but I hope that UNLV wins by 1 to 6 points. I'm on Syracuse under 7.5 in terms of a regular season win total. When I was looking at this schedule, I assumed this was a likely win for Syracuse. So the fact that UNLV is playing well and Syracuse lost to Stanford a few weeks ago, I'm kind of happy that win total where it is. Obviously, a lot can change, but I just wasn't totally buying Syracuse with so many new players and Kyle McCord as their quarterback. It's a team that was just going to walk in and win 8 games. So I am not going to bet this game because I have a stake in terms of, or a rooting interest financially with Syracuse losing. But at this price, it has to be Syracuse or pass, especially with kind of UNLV in the spotlight in college football, which we haven't really seen much under head coach Barry Odom.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I'm interested to see now that all eyes are on UNLV. Everyone's looking at them undefeated, ranked. Like this is going to be the game they need to prove themselves. They're laying at 6.5. Seems like a lot to me. Nate, let's go to you for number 4.
Number 4.
All right. I know a team that burned maybe some people last week, burned me in terms of like win totals on both teams, but UCF losing to Colorado. But I'm going to go back to UCF and expect a bounce back here and lay 2.5 at Florida. Just think they have a good bounce back performance here. They'll be fully focused. This game is huge for UCF. With the way Florida's trending, maybe UCF could take some recruits away from Florida that they could be battling with. Obviously, Florida, a different level of SEC program, and UCF in the Big 12. But if there's maybe some middling players UCF wants to get from kind of that Orlando area, keep them at closer to home than Gainesville, this would be a big game for them. I do like UCF and their ground game in general. It was a team I was high on going into this season with KJ Jefferson and Harvey and Boone, those 2 running backs with this Gus Malzahn offense. So I'd expect the UCF ground game to play well against a Florida defensive front who we've seen sort of quit at times this year. I mean, they really quit against Miami and look bad against A&M. And I just don't think Florida's in a good spot at all. And this line move where Florida was a short favorite in this game, then UCF took money on Monday. I still think this is fine up till this price at 2.5. And I can see UCF taking a lead in this game, Florida fans leaving at halftime, and it looks like another really ugly scene in Gainesville. And take a look at the future schedule for Florida. You have play Tennessee next week. And then obviously much has been made of their tough November schedule. That includes teams like Georgia, Texas, LSU, and Ole Miss. So yeah, I mean, Florida is just a team I want no part of. This was a team that was like a touchdown favorite at Mississippi State few weeks ago, and they're coming off a bye, so maybe we get their best effort in this game. But yeah, I have no real desire, I guess, in backing Florida here, and definitely want to go against them even as a home underdog, that is, at home. So give me UCS to get the run game going and maybe hopefully embarrass the Gators on Saturday evening.
This is a UCF team that has had so many opportunities to like win a lot of the games that they have lost. They've been in all the games that they've played in pretty much this season. And I think now you kind of mentioned it, they smell a little blood in the water there with Florida, an opportunity to take down a bigger team, one of the bigger teams in the state, interstate rivals. This is the chance that they can really make a name for themselves, taking down Florida, smelling a bad team that maybe just sees a schedule ahead of them and are just kind of done with the season. And we know UCF has a talent to beat a team like this. So I do like that bet, Nate. I think that'll be good. Number 3 time.
Number 3.
All right, Nate, we are going to go to my school, the Indiana Hoosiers. I think this might be the 3rd or 4th time I've talked about IU on this show, and it's really because they're good. This is a good football team, Nate. This is not some smoke show. This is not a mirage. This is an Indiana football team led by Coach Kurt Signetti that is actually making some waves in the national media. You got Joe Buck talking about him on national TV, posting about it on Twitter. This is a real football team. And because of that, I'm going to buy in on them, buy in on how well their offense is playing. And I'm going to take their team total over 27.5 points against Northwestern. And Northwestern, we know, has a pretty good defense, but I think this Indiana offense is going to outplay it for all 4 quarters, if we're being honest. This is the 11th team in the nation in points per game. Indiana scores almost 42 points per game. They're 20th in yards per game, 466 yards averaged offensively for this team. Curtis Rourke, their quarterback, has thrown 11 touchdowns, so only 2 interceptions. And he has a 73% completion percentage. There's every single metric on this team, especially offensive advanced metric, that says Indiana should score at least 30-plus points in this one. And I know Northwestern has yet to allow 30 points this season, but you look at this team and you look at the way that they play, and I really think their explosive ability throwing the ball is going to take advantage. NU has a bad passing defense. They're 111th in opponent EPA per dropback. They struggle to defend good quarterbacks. And this is where Curtis Rourke comes in and is just a good quarterback. He's going to throw the ball around. The run and gun offense for Indiana, I think, is going to take Northwestern by surprise. And I think they're going to be able to just get in the end zone a bunch of times. Northwestern doesn't hog the ball in terms of time of possession. Indiana can score quickly. I like it all to settle where Indiana gets another 30-plus points in a game like this, and they haven't scored fewer than 31 points this season, and I think that continues at Northwestern this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind this bet at all. I do like Indiana and what they're building there. I will say, before making this bet, make sure to check the weather, because this game is being played at Northwestern's temporary stadium on the lake.
Yep.
And we know in Chicago that it could be windy, not really in the city, but you get towards the lake and the wind really whips up off the shores of Lake Michigan. So it's definitely a game to check the weather for. But although maybe that will lead to Indiana just kind of running the ball and having some success in that area and not asking Rourke to do too much. So just something to consider, that maybe you can get a better number closer to kickoff if there are weather concerns in terms of a total, a team total or full game total. But yeah, I'm a little scared sometimes to go over when you have the unpredictability of the wind in our hometown.
I do think Indiana has shown to be able to adapt for the most part to the defense that they are playing. Weather-wise, I don't think they've had a really bad weather game this season, so it'll be interesting to see how they adapt to that. But I just trust this team offensively. They've given me no reason not to trust them offensively. So I really do like him going into this. Also, don't forget, gamingjuice.com. Nate and I both write for the gamingjuice.com. You can sign up for a free FREE account right now. You can read all of our stuff. Nate and I might be doing some question and answer sessions later down the road in the college football season. So that'll be really fun on the website. Again, it's all free. Make an account, read our content. Free. Very exciting. You don't have to pay for anything at all. But Nate, it's time for you for your number 2 bet.
Number 2.
Yeah, this is my favorite bet of the week, and an article you could read now on the Gaming Juice. But I like Washington, unranked Washington against number 10 Michigan on Saturday night. It's kind of funny. When I was looking at this game, I almost forgot that this was a rematch of last year's national championship game that we saw in Houston. But the reason why is because there's so much change from both sides of both teams in this one, where Michigan obviously doesn't have J.J. McCarthy anymore. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh, their head coach, Sharon Moore, was on that staff, so at least there's some familiarity there. But a lot of the key contributors from Michigan, especially on offense from last year's team, are not on this year's team, and that's why the offense has kind of struggled this year, in my opinion. But then you look at Washington. I mean, Kalen DeBoer leaves days after the national title game to Alabama, and we saw how good of a game planner he was last week. You bring in Jed Fish, completely new staff. Bill Belichick's son is a defensive coordinator. In terms of players, no Michael Penix, no Ruma Dunze, McMillan, and then the other wide receiver whose name's escaping me. You have a completely new offense and new players, personnel, and a different head coach and coaching staff. So it doesn't really feel like a revenge game for Washington, because most of the Washington players were not part of last year's team, at least like half of them, and their coaching staff. So
yeah,
kind of a weird dynamic, especially a conference game now with Washington being in the Big Ten and the Saturday evening start in Seattle. But Washington was a team going into the year I was down on. I bet their win total under 7.5. I thought all the new changes from a team that went 12-0 in the regular season last year Plus, the schedule was pretty difficult. Like after this game, it's not easy for Washington. They have to play Iowa, they have to play USC, Oregon, I believe Penn State. So yeah, this is a really tough game for Washington. One they kind of need to win, especially after they started off the season 3-2. Last week we were on Rutgers, or I think we were both on Rutgers last week. I talked about on the show, and then you also personally maybe in your own betting, but we were very fortunate to win that game. Washington had like a 97% win expectancy. They outgained Rutgers by over 200 yards. They threw all over them compared to what Rutgers was doing. But it was the missed field goals, 3 of them by Washington. There was some costly mistakes, including a blocked field goal Washington had, but then a player just decided to run on the sideline, and there was a substitution infraction, which led to a first down for Rutgers, and then the next play they threw a touchdown. So
Insane.
A 7 or 10 point swing before the half. Just like everything went wrong for Washington. They also lost to Washington State in the Apple Cup in week 3. But if they win those games where they dominated the box score or had the edge at least in the box score, I think Washington is kind of regarded as maybe a different looking team where we're thinking, okay, this team's a pretty solid Big Ten team, and they should be definitely favored over Michigan by maybe a little bit more than what they are, where it's sitting at less than a field goal right now. On the other side, really concerned about Michigan and their offense, especially if they get down in a game. They have had the advantage the last 2 weeks of playing in a positive game script, but they also almost blew a lead last week against Minnesota, and then they did blow a lead against USC in week 4. And I know they won that game against USC, and that was a big game for Sharon Moore to get. But I really wasn't impressed with Michigan that game. They had a couple long runs that were touchdowns. They had a pick 6, but you take that out, and Michigan's offense is very pedestrian. Alex Orji just can't throw. There's no passing game with him. They can't hit the wide receiver. So if Michigan falls behind this game, they can be in a lot of trouble unless they make a quarterback change. But the backup who started the first 3 games was not very good for Michigan at all. So everything's kind of pointing here. Washington, a team I think is a little undervalued based on their results from this year. They're a little bit better than the record. And I think Michigan at number 10, very overranked and potentially overrated just because they're a big brand and everyone saw them go 15-0 last year. So I'm not high on Michigan at all. Add in the fact this is Michigan's first road game of the season. It'll be a tough place to play. I always feel like it's a shock to the system when a team plays 4 or 5 games to start the season at home and then have to go on the road. It's a little bit of a tricky environment, a tricky trip they're not used to because they're playing a new Big Ten team. So it all adds up to Washington here. I think Jed Fish's team gets the job done. Saturday night, I'd take them on the money line, but I'd lay 2.5 or better on Washington. This line's kind of bounced where anytime it's gotten to 3, there's been Michigan money at the full 3. But I think that because of that, we're getting a palatable price on the Washington money line.
This game definitely has been, I've been going back and forth on this game because I think all the points you made about Michigan's offense being not very good, just quite simply, and not being able to move the ball, I think all of that is correct. But for whatever reason, and this is kind of how I felt about this Michigan team last season. Now, they had a better coach, they had better players, so it was a little bit different. But they, for whatever reason, they just found ways to win games. And this team has sort of copied that a little bit where like they're in situations where you don't think they can win the game and somehow they figure out a way to do it. Now, I don't know because they don't have the talent they have last year. I don't know if that's a sustainable model, a sustainable factor that they'll be able to carry, especially on the road, go into a very tough environment to play against a team that's very underrated. I think a lot of people are betting against that very clearly. But the thing and the hesitation that I have in betting Washington is because of that Michigan factor where, for whatever reason, they just find ways to win games. And I just don't know if that can continue with this team consistently or if it's something they did the past couple games, able to find ways to win. And their luck's going to run out on the road against a team that's hungry to show that they're actually good. Time for the group ride, Nate?
Let's go.
All right, let's go for our group ride. The number 1 play, the one we both agree on.
Number 1.
All right, we're going Vanderbilt, Nate. We're gonna go for the tough one. What are we doing? Let me. I gotta clear the palate for this one because this is gonna be a tough one. Vanderbilt at home playing the Alabama Crimson Tide, the new number 1 team in the nation.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a simple way to handicap the game. You just bet against Alabama off their game of the year type of performance against Georgia, where they were really good but blew a big lead and were up 28, but then losing with 2:40 left, and then ended up winning the game. But I've had some concerns about Alabama's defense. It's definitely not a defense that we're used to seeing from Alabama in terms of just maybe scheme, players, but Georgia had a lot of players kind of running wide open. Maybe it's because they were at a negative game script and Alabama was playing a prevent defense. But I think Vanderbilt off a bye could have a pretty strong effort here. This isn't the typical Vandy we see where there's kind of a walkover. They have a guy in Diego Pavia, quarterback, who's I think could keep them in the game. And while I think Alabama probably is going to be able to score points here, I also think that Vandy can maybe not match them, but at least do it well enough to keep within the number. Don't think really Alabama needs to kind of go all in this game. Just get a win, go back to Tuscaloosa. You have some big games coming up against South Carolina, and then the real big one at Tennessee in Week 8. So, yeah, I think it's just kind of a situational handicap where you're fading Alabama off that win and a potential hangover from the Crimson Tide.
In our last podcast that we did, we had the situations of the week, and this would qualify as probably one of the top situations, certainly because it's a hangover situation for Alabama after the high and the emotions and the craziness of last Saturday night's game against Georgia. They now have to go on the road, a little bit sleepy against Vanderbilt. It's not going to be raucous. It's not going to be crazy. It's going to be Vanderbilt. You're not going to be getting any intense atmosphere either way, which I think is a detriment to Alabama because sometimes you feed off the animosity when you go on the road. It's going to be a little bit quiet. So to me, like you said, this is kind of the perfect spot to take Vanderbilt with the points. And the way that I always describe Vanderbilt this season, Nate, they're spicy. They're a spicy team with Diego Pavia there. I mean, they're unbelievable in terms of just having like the will to win, which is such a stupid phrase to me sometimes because you can't quantify it. It's such kind of a nothing phrase. But when he is quarterback, they just find ways to annoy you. They find ways to get yardage. They find ways to score points. So when Alabama's coming off a huge win, number one team in the nation, all eyes are on them. Now they have to go on the road, a little bit sleepy, go into not a huge atmosphere and play this Vanderbilt team that's always going to be hungry for a win, that's playing the best team on their schedule up until this point. They prep all off season for this kind of a game. I'll take plus 23.5. Some 24s were floating early on in the week. Maybe we see some money on Alabama later on when those international people start betting on Thursday and Friday. Maybe we see Alabama get some money. Could take Vanderbilt at plus 24. But I think there's a big reason why we both agree on this bet.
Yep, and I'm definitely going to wait to bet it to see if I can get a better number because there was 24.5 earlier in the week.
Yep. Don't forget, you can rate, review, and subscribe. You can rate us and review us on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter. Our handles are right below there. It's also to my right here. So follow us on Twitter. You can yell at us. You can talk at us, ask us questions, whatever you want to do. We're here. We're available. We write those articles every week on thegamingjuice.com. But, Nate, you know what time it is? It's bonus time. It's bonus time. What do you have for us in bonus time, Nate? You know what? We'll start with you. I usually start, but it's all you, sir.
Okay, let's take Georgia Tech minus 9.5. This is potential for a bigger bet for me, but I want to see if this line comes down. I missed out on the -7 on Georgia Tech, but want to bet on Georgia Tech off the bye. I thought they played fine against Louisville. Mentioned at the top of the show they had some unluckiness in terms of giving up defensive and special teams touchdown that I think will correct itself. And then Duke coming off a really big win against North Carolina. They're down 20-0. They come back to win. Duke feels just like a really phony 5-0 team where they're probably still one of the worst teams in the ACC, but their win against North Carolina last week, and then they won't beat Northwestern in a game they could have easily lost in week 2, which I wish they did as a guy who bet Duke under 5 wins before the season and kind of staring at what a push at best probably as long as Georgia Tech wins on Saturday. So I'm fine laying the points with Georgia Tech. I think they can have a potential to blow out the Blue Devils led by quarterback Haynes King.
Let's stay in the great state of Georgia, Nate. I'm going to take the Georgia Bulldogs. Not going to take a full game against Auburn, but I'm going to take them first half. And honestly, the reasoning is pretty simple. This is not the most complex bet of all time, but it's Georgia coming off a bad game against Alabama where they lost. They had a chance to come back, had a chance to take it to overtime, got picked off at the end of that game, had an awful first half in that game. Everyone wrote them off by halftime. So I think now, after a loss, they come out against a very bad team in Auburn, a team who I've talked about on this show has probably quit on their head coach for the most part. I think they have a flip of that first half from last week. I think they want to come out strong. They want to keep showing the future committee, and they want to show fans, and they want to show reporters that they are still Georgia. And I think they come out very strong in that first half in Athens against Auburn, -13.5, go up 2 scores against a bad Tigers team. I like it. Very simple reasoning, but it makes sense to me. All right, Nate, that'll do it for us. You have any more bets? Any other advice? I think we're all good.
No, I think I mean, there's a few things I'm considering, but I don't feel comfortable talking about it. But next week, I'll be willing to open everything up when I feel like I have a better gauge of the betting market.
It'll be a fun week next week. Next 2 weeks, we're gonna go hog wild. Don't forget, you can sign up for free at thegamingjuice.com. You can read Nate and myself. Find us on Twitter as well. But until then, good luck, and we'll see you next week.